Are you the one who is to come, or are we to wait for another? Go and tell what you hear and see. The blind receive their sight, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the poor have good news brought to them. Norwood, Ohio is an enclave of the Rust Belt plunked down in the middle of Cincinnati. The town has been struggling since the GM plant closed in the late 80s. It doesn't seem like a destination for gourmet, artisanal, organic pizza. But if you went to Norwood for pizza at Mariah Pie on Friday nights, the one night a week the restaurant was open, you'd have to stand in a line out the door. Inside, diners crowded around the chalkboard on the back wall of the restaurant to see the day's menu. Always something inventive. Maybe butternut squash pizza, spicy shredded cabbage salad, and mulberry pie for dessert. All the ingredients except the flour, cheese, oil, and spices were grown by Mariah Pie's owners, Aaron and Robert Lockridge, in gardens they kept around Norwood. But you'd notice a strange thing about the menu, something that was missing: prices. Mariah Pie was a pay-as-you-can pizzeria. At the end of your meal, your server would place a cloth envelope on your table and ask you to pay what you could. This seems like a laughable way to run a business, and it was a business. Mariah Pie provided the majority of Robin and Aaron's income. Some diners did take their food for free, but others, most of them, looked around at the wealthy foodies who'd come in from Hyde Park and Walnut Hills, the table full of kids who were safe and welcome here while their parents were at work, and the folks from down the street whose clothes and accents said working poor. And most of the diners realized that by eating together, sharing the food so carefully grown and prepared for them, all these diverse people had become a community. They'd entered into relationship with Robert and Aaron and with everyone else at Mariah Pie. And most of the diners did pay what they could. Some put cash into the cloth envelopes. One homeless man drew pictures to decorate the wall of the restaurant. Another couple, down on their luck, brought banana and orange peels for the compost that fed the gardens. Aaron said, "We believe every person who comes through the door of Mariah Pie has something to give us, even more than what we may be giving them." Mariah Pie ran for 8 years until COVID. Robert and Aaron have now opened a breakfast cafe with the same homegrown ingredients, the same pay-as-you-can menu, the same kind of community where everyone is valued and everyone is fed. Are you the one who is to come, or are we to wait for another? Go and tell what you hear and see. The blind receive their sight, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the poor have good news brought to them. Times Square, the loud, bright, crowded, overwhelming commercial center of New York City. Maybe you're there some weekend in December, and the moment you step up from the subway, you're dazed by the taxis honking and people chattering and the lights and signs, jumbotrons everywhere, blaring brand names at you faster than you can read them. As you try to get your bearings, 30 or 40 people start clapping, shaking tambourines, and they burst into a jazzy gospel number as the crowd steps back to give them room. They're singing, "Stop, stop shopping, stop, back away from the products, don't you shop." And behind you someone mutters, "Hey, it's Reverend Billy." The choir turns to face a man in a neon pink suit and a clergy collar with his blonde hair teased into a pompadour. He picks up a bullhorn, and in the cadence of a fire and brimstone preacher, he shouts, "Americans are addicted to products. A recent study found that New Yorkers are exposed to 10,000 advertisements a day. You don't think that has a deep impact on our psychology? It screws up how we think. It subverts our best values. We need to start a new kind of society. This Christmas, stop shopping. This Christmas, give the gift of time. Give the gift of love. Earth-alleluia, earth-alleluia. And you wonder, have you stumbled into activism or performance art or a church service? It kind of seems like all three. Reverend Billy winds down the sermon, and a couple of bored-looking NYPD officers march over and move the choir on, steering them away from the Starbucks. Reverend Billy has been banned in every Starbucks in the world for performing exorcisms on the cash registers. Until the choir disperses in the crowd and the bright pink suit slips out of sight. Are you the one who is to come, or are we to wait for another? Go and tell what you hear and see. The blind receive their sight, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the poor have good news brought to them. If you go to Holden Village, a Lutheran renewal center in the North Cascade Mountains of Washington State, you'll meet a man in his 30s I'll call Nathan. He's kind of a different person. Social interactions and eye contact are awkward for him. He's really committed to routines. It will not surprise you that Nathan has severe autism. When he first came to Holden, he was almost nonverbal. Most people stay in Holden Village a few days. Those who come to work in the village are there for a couple of months, a year or two at the most. But Nathan has lived there for several years. He struggled to find a place in the world outside the village, so he kept coming back. You'll notice two things about Nathan. He's different, and he's so ordinary. People sit and chat and joke with him at meals in the community dining hall. He's kind of a raconteur. On Friday nights, when the village kitchen makes pizza for the whole community and all the special diets therein, you'll find the regular pizzas, the gluten-free pizzas, the dairy-free pizzas, the gluten-free and dairy-free pizza, and a pizza that's just labeled Nathan. Pepperoni, no cheese. Nathan takes walks or lounges around when everyone else is working. You wonder what he's doing in this community that is built on everyone pitching in. But you also notice that no matter how muddy or snowy it is outside, and it is muddy or snowy most of the year in the North Cascades, when you come into Holden's main building for breakfast every morning, the floors are always clean. And eventually someone mentions that, like many people with autism, Nathan doesn't sleep much. And late at night, long after everyone else goes to bed, Nathan is sweeping and mopping all the common areas, a job that has to be done when the buildings are empty, that Nathan is perfectly suited to do. He might be the most important person in the whole village. Are you the one who is to come, or are we to wait for another? Go and tell what you hear and see. The blind receive their sight, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the poor have good news brought to them. John the Baptist has been waiting and waiting and waiting for the Messiah. He hears about Jesus and he wonders, is this the one? Jesus doesn't answer directly. He says to look and listen. When you hear and see healing, liberation, new life, God's presence among the poor, you will know that the Messiah is among you. Whenever and wherever you hear and see those things, you will know that the Messiah is among you. We too are waiting and waiting and waiting for the Messiah. But what if Jesus' advent among us doesn't happen once or twice? What if it happens all the time? Wherever we hear and see healing, liberation, new life, God's presence among the poor, Jesus has come into the world again. Jesus has come in an experimental pizzeria where everyone gives what they have to support the community they have made. Jesus has come in an activist/actor/street preacher, trying to set us free from the addiction to stuff that is isolating us from each other and killing our planet. Jesus has come in a mountain village that embraces a person who is different and loves him for exactly who he is. All we have to do to find Jesus is look and listen for him. For Jesus has come again, Jesus is coming again, Jesus will come again. So we look around us, we listen to our lives, our communities, and then we go and tell what we hear and see. When we search for Jesus, we will find him. Earth-alleluia, Earth-alleluia.